My guest today, Milena Ivkovic, is an architect, a public space designer, and a civic participation innovator. She leads the Association Placemaking Western Balkans, based in Belgrade, Serbia. It's a non-profit organization, helps to create better public spaces for everyone. The association is promoting the practice of placemaking in the Southeast Europe region. She is also the founder and creative director of BLOK 74, Urban Simulations and Urban Communications, based in Rotterdam. The office develops analog and digital tools to manage co-design processes and urban planning, focusing on place-led participation. Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I am Asban Sari, the founder of the organization Peacemakers Pakistani, and I am bringing you the stories of placemakers, artists, and professionals from around the globe about how they created an impact and made change happen. You are listening to the Making It Happen show. Thank you for joining in. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Milena. How are you? So good to see you. How's it going?
Hey, hi, Asbach. It's good to see you as well. It's going well. It's springtime here in Rotterdam, in Netherlands, and I'm very happy to see a little bit of sun after a long winter.
So awesome. How was the pandemic here in Rotterdam?
Well, the pandemic was quite crazy, you know. It's been actually, I think people are just starting to comprehend that it took 2 years of pandemic. Actually, we were really under some really severe restrictions at the beginning, and it took almost 18 months of really serious pandemic, and then beginning this year things started to ease down, and now everyone is enjoying public space again like nothing happened. And it's actually great to see that that people are really appreciating the fact that they can just be outside and inside and meet and do all the social stuff. So the energy is quite good after 2 years of of big scare.
Great. That's good to know that, because it's such a hopeful experience to see things happening, coming back to normal again. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear your answers to my questions. So let's move on to them. Okay,
Yeah, let's start.
Yeah, sure. Okay, tell me about how did you find your passion for public spaces and the placemaking movement?
Well, it actually started from the time. It goes back from the time when I studied architecture and urban planning. I did my studies in Belgrade, in Serbia, a long time ago, and somehow I got attracted more to study the space between the buildings than the buildings itself, because my study in architecture was really very traditional, focused very much on buildings and bit less on the, let's say, on public space. So I kind of really like that, because I think it's the link with the real life in cities much more than buildings itself. And actually my master's thesis was about urban renewal of public spaces, and that's how the things got started. And then when I moved to the Netherlands, it was a very positive change to see how the things are being, how the public space has been developed here. And I started as an urban designer, as a public space designer, to work on development of public space. And a bit later, I kind of specialized in civic engagement for collaborative public space design. And that's, I think, the essence of placemaking. So that's how I kind of, rolled into the placemaking methods and approaches which have this very strong social component, starting from the building design, from the space design, and then into collaborative design. And that's how how this, let's say, dedication to placemaking grew through the time.
Nice. Okay, so after this, the whole experience, do you have any place attachment story with the place where you live now or where you lived in the past?
A special story or a kind of well, it's when I look to the past, it's always the place where I lived in the past. The let's say the my house in Belgrade was really kind of very luckily situated close to this nice small scaled urban pocket, very nice, very green, very communal space. And I really lived throughout the decades with looking at this space from, like, every day since I was a child and growing up. And it kind of became a very symbol of what the quality a neighborhood space is, even though the city is completely chaotic and not that beautiful after all. And then when I moved to the Netherlands, I came to live in a neighborhood which also kind of appreciates very much a human scale and a neighborhood space, and it has a special attention to how the street has been made, and that's something I really appreciate about the place where I live right now. It's still in the inner city. It's not a suburb, so it's a high density area. But there is a lot of attention to the street profile, how the street and the houses in the street have been placed. And what I really appreciate in the place where I live right now here, and that has a lot to do with placemaking, is that it has such a great appreciation for nature. It's really like 2 years ago, we started our own neighborhood action to kind of even green it a bit more and, plant some smaller plants in front of our houses. And it's really nice, because it shows this micro scale. It's a kind of enjoyment in everything that it's micro scale. So I kind of appreciate that very much.
Nice. And yes, I really want to visit Netherlands because of its human scale design and all of its aura that it creates, the vibe it generates. Okay,
yes.
So yeah. So share your key lessons from experience of working in the Netherlands, Africa, Asia, and the Balkans, the Belgrade.
Yeah. Well, it's I have to say it's been really a great pleasure and an amazing opportunities that I have in the past couple of years working internationally in different contexts, because it's to be able to work with different cultures, with different cities, with different urban contexts, and then to see that more or less the values are the same, but the expression and the design or the aesthetics of it are completely different depending on the local context. What I found particularly challenging working outside of Europe is, of course, the different scale. Sometimes the immense traffic congestion. So like this, public space that is being complex in many different ways. There is so much more pressure on public space because the cities are bigger, the populations are much higher of the cities. So there is so much more pressure on a public space. And that has also its positive sides in a way, that there are so many more activities in public space than in the Western context. So it's in that sense, it's a bit more lively, or a bit more social space in its unique way. So what I found it particularly challenging but also inspiring for a designer is to try to really design in another context, working with these kind of basic values, like, okay, we want to create a human scale space, we want to work with communities, we want to develop these great green designs, but everything is so different, starting from climate, starting from from how people interact with each other, starting with all these stakeholders who have completely different views and needs, and to be able to adapt to that and to be able to give an interpretation of that, I found it always very inspiring. So that's my lesson would be to try to leave your learned values from your own context when you live, and try to learn and apply your skills as architects in a complete different context. It's very good. It's very challenging. It's very creative. It stimulates you to think in a completely different way. So that would be my lesson. Just forget what you have learned, and start doing design from scratch. That's
Very nice. Yes, it's a very important lesson, and definitely it inspires the teams that build local. It
yes,
inspires
to be yes,
the
exactly.
local context. Yes.
Yeah, to understand the local context and to try to make something beautiful out of it. And also working with local people, I think it's essential for that, because you are always a stranger coming from the outside. You have your own ideas or kind of standards of visions or whatever, but when you work together in a team with the local experts or local stakeholders, it's really immensely valuable. You create such amazing things doing that.
Yes, definitely. And being a learner or having a passion to learn, it's the best part about placemaking, that we get to learn a lot of things with time in
Yes.
places.
Yes, and there is also this a little bit of experimentational value with placemaking. You can just really try a lot of things, because work with cultural, work with artists, which is kind of essential to understand the context and to really give a new shape to that context.
Yes. Okay, so what are the challenges and opportunities you find about public spaces in Serbia?
I think that's a that's that's a very good question. I don't know if I'm going to give you the good answer to that, because it's what I found it a challenge is, of course, and that's maybe also something that it's very similar to working with non-European contexts. It's the pressure on public space is huge. The pressure of urbanization is huge. A lot of public space is getting degraded because of the rate of urbanization. Just everything needs to be densified, built in. A lot of greenery has been lost somewhere in the middle. There are also big issues and challenges with air pollution, with generally, environmental concerns. Because again, going back to urbanization or the rate of development. And somehow people are looking to public space as this, universal solution, or, this space when things can be improved in a good way. And it makes me think actually about how important public space is for everyday life of people, because policymakers or urban planners or politicians, they talk about the measures of long-term urban development. And if we make this road, or if we make this green comprehensive plan in the 30 years time, everything will be good and the pollution will drop, and that's all good. But people live from day to day, and they look at their neighborhood, they go to work, they go to school every day, and they don't have time to to wait for this huge large scale systemic improvements in urban systems. And that's why I think placemaking is so good. It's so essential, because it can give results on relatively short term periods, can give improvements on a short term periods. It can be this link between now and that, what is happening in 10 years. There's these big things that should happen in 10 years time. And in terms of opportunities, if I have to sketch on that, the opportunity is that you can get people mobilized quite well around the issues of neighborhood greenery or the neighborhood improvement, because that's, there is kind of mistrust in official ways of planning. So everything that it's hands-on, and everything that can be done in a very simple way, can get also a lot of support from larger stakeholders or larger communities. So I think that's quite an opportunity in that, to have this kind of massive small change of happening simultaneously, even outside of the planning, of the planning frameworks. And that's also one of the big challenges, is how do we actually make the planning more flexible for these small interventions. And it's also not, it's a challenge. It's not only in Serbia, I can imagine it's the same challenge in Pakistan or in other countries.
Yes, I agree with you. Definitely, these are the challenges and the areas where participation of civilians is very new concept. Or
Yes, it's a very new concept.
yeah, so it's small through small changes we can build the trust with people and with the
Yeah.
community, and this is how we can bring forth their participation in bigger projects. Definitely. Okay, so
Yes.
what is your current focus on placemaking in Balkan or the Southeast Europe region?
Can you repeat it again? What is the
What is the
quite?
what is your current focus for the placemaking in Balkan and the Southeast Europe region?
The main focus.
Yeah.
The main focus is, well, we are now actually, the Placemaking Western Balkans started relatively recently, and we started last year, and we started, our first focus is on green neighborhoods, right? So we're starting first to try to replenish the lost greenery in the neighborhoods, because we think that's something that's, it's very close to people's hearts and minds. They see a lot of things getting lost in their neighborhoods, and that's also something that we could get a lot of traction and a lot of attention also from the policymakers. So that's the first focus. But we're looking really into, in a coming year, let's say, we're looking also to broaden it a bit up to other environmental questions, like, for instance, the water issues, the issues of water management, or the climate change resilience, that kind of stuff, to really expand a bit more on that and use placemaking for this. And what has been traditionally very well in that region is, the street arts, the street life, the kind of creativity in public space in those areas is very strong. So we would also like to, focus on collaboration with, let's say, more arts and crafts and culture people doing cultural initiatives in public space.
Awesome, interesting. Yes. Okay, about the green areas, green neighborhood, are you engaging people to contribute to creating more green neighborhoods, or are you asking the property dealers or people who own the areas?
Yeah, that's well, it's a good question again. We are starting to work first with civic associations, who are interested in greening the neighborhoods. But of course, the civic association is not the owner of the green space. It's usually the city is the owner, or they're private owners as well. So we are now first aiming to kind of find or catalyze the collaboration between these civic initiatives and the city, and try to be the mediators in between, and kind of convince the city that this is a good thing. That's exactly what you were talking about, building trust. It's quite difficult to do that. There is a lot of things that need to be done. And also, when we work with cities, we see that the planning authorities are most of the time very eager to help or provide, or at least they listen, but they don't have quite the instruments in their planning toolbox to really formalize this. They don't know how to fill it, where to fill it in, because, as you say, these are quite new initiatives, and it's one big question is, of course, the duration, how viable, how how resistant are these projects, how long they can stay in one place, or at the moment when you're not really the owner of the place, then the risk is that you're depending on the goodwill of the city to do this, and the longevity of this civic organization, which can, maybe, be lost in a year or two. They're not that stable. It's a quite unstable scene, let's say. So, of course, to work with private land or private developers is much more, let's say, complex, interesting, difficult. But then you can maybe have a bit more lasting results. So there is no good or bad way. We would like to do both, actually, because we think we need to be active on both. We have to persuade the private owners in the value of it as well. But we are starting first with the communities right now, because we think there is so many spaces which are publicly owned still, or even disputed without clear ownership. Sometimes you have also those spaces which you don't know who they belong to. Is it from the cities, from some kind of corporation, or what is it actually? So we are starting with those spaces first and see what happens. And as I said, in the terms of greenery, we're now working a lot with urban gardens, because we think again that when people have the opportunity to tend for their own food or for their own benefit, their own flowers or whatever that greenery is, their shadow, to just give a good microclimate, I think we can mobilize more interest for that.
Great. I wish you good luck for all that.
Yes, it's a quite engaging project, and on the other hand, we know that there are these problems are more or less the same across the whole region. So one of the missions we would like to fulfill is also to facilitate the exchange of knowledge. How different cities in the region deal with same issues. That's what we would like to reveal and to stimulate this kind of knowledge exchange.
Awesome. Okay, tell me about the state of tourism industry in Serbia and its regions, and what is the action being taken by the placemaking team there?
Well, it's again, quite a dynamic situation there when it comes to tourism, and one of the biggest drivers for tourism is not so much, the official cultural heritage. Of course, it is, and it attracts, like official buildings, official gardens, official, public parks, and that kind of stuff, monuments. It's also not so much the nature, which is quite good in the country. In the city itself is also quite interesting. What are big natural areas in the city which have a lot of tourist potential. But from the terms of placemaking, really urban placemaking, the biggest value or the biggest tourist attraction is actually the combination, what I just mentioned, of the street art and the kind of street life which develops in public spaces. So there is a lot of that kind of, let's say, public art for public space initiatives going on, and they're making the city very vital. And when you have a lot of these things happening, and they're happening all over the city, somehow it creates this image or brand of a city that it's open to artists, that it's open to, that kind of cultural activities. And that's attraction for itself. At least that's how I see it as a tourist coming to
Yes, definitely, I agree with it. That at least it attracts me as a tourist.
Yeah.
Like the culture
Yes, there is
happening.
Yes, there is this quality of informality and in that kind of cultural practices, which is a kind of tourist attraction for itself.
Yeah. Okay, so according to you, how does cultural identity help in public space design? Does it or not?
I think it helps a lot. It helps a lot, especially when you have a lot of diverse, let's say, artistic practices that are using public space. And especially when there is a certain kind of, freedom to experiment with different medium, different topics, or whatever. And that's very nice to see that there are so many identities that can be expressed in public space, and that's again one of the biggest values of particularly of Belgrade I see is, there is a skateboard culture, there is a other youth culture, there is this particular graffiti artists doing just one style all over the city. So there are special places along the riverside, which are famous for their galleries or whatever. So that's because there are so many different ways how you can use public space. There is for the different cultural practices, it creates this diversity of images, diversity of spaces, and diversity of uses, and people like to be there, people like to spend their time there, they like to eat, they like to take their friends, go out with the family, and then it's really very nice. And those are usually not traditional heritage inspired cultural practices. There is a lot of kind of this modern ways of using media and modern topics. So it's quite inspiring.
Yeah, and maybe these are the foundation or the root causes behind the belonging and the ownership, how it creates
Yeah.
public space, right?
Yes, exactly. That's also. I sometimes I feel this question behind it, like who is really owner of this public space. There is also a lot of critique that's coming through the art about how the public space has been used. So there is a lot of these critical interventions or tactical urbanism interventions, which are also a way of how the placemaking can, show or raise awareness about something, and it's another added value to it.
Yes. Okay, so what is your biggest challenge and lesson as a civic participation innovator?
Well, the biggest challenge is, we mentioned it two times before already. Of course, it's building trust. Why should you start with this? Why do you do this? Who is going to participate, and what are you going to do with the results? And within this process, what I found the most scariest thing is, of course, that you go through the process, you invite people, and then at the end, not much happens, or just the half of the result happens, and then it kind of leads to certain frustration among the parties that have been involved. So I think that's the best way, or speaking from the experience, how to approach this is to really examine your goals, your ambitions. What do you want to achieve with this particular civic engagement? And what do you want to achieve in this particular public space, to kind of avoid, disappointments and promises that cannot be made? Because when you go through this process and the result is not satisfactory for those who took part, you actually create a kind of atmosphere when people just don't believe it is a method or as a tool, and they say, well, okay, we just spent our time whole weekend working on this and nothing is happening. So that's the biggest challenge, and sometimes you really need to be creative to kind of mitigate the risks with that kind of process.
Yes, that's a great lesson for me as well.
Yeah.
When you move out and work with more people and strangers, and they don't know that you are trustworthy or not, projects are the basics for the interaction and for building trust, definitely. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so how do you convince people to find strength and opportunities in the place they already live and contribute to making it a great place? Because I find it very difficult for making people talk and share what do they want in their places, or like they imagine the places to be different from their
Hmm.
dream matters, etc. So how do you convince
Hmm.
them?
Yeah, that's also another challenge, because usually people either tend to be really completely dissatisfied if that's kind of completely degraded space. They're just dissatisfied and tired, and they just want to have it clean, and that's where the ambition ends. Today it's like just make it clean. But sometimes I also get in interaction with neighborhoods when we're doing this participatory workshops or co-design workshops and aimed for placemaking, is they also tend to somehow go the next level and start these big fantasy, big programs, they want to have completely makeovers of everything. So then is my task as a kind of community placemaker to really bring also those ideas back down to a little bit back down to earth and say like, okay, well, great, but let's see what's really possible. And I think that we should not really limit people in that. Let them really express what they want and how do they see what could really improve their lives, even if it's going a little bit beyond the particular space or the budgets or the possibilities or the realities of that. And try to kind of use our creative skills as a designers to find a good translation of those wishes into spatial components, or try to make really a good interpretation of that. So it's a question of interpretation of wishes sometimes, and that's also not that easy. It's because people tend to start talking about completely different things than just than concrete solutions for the space.
Yeah, but okay, yes. Let's see. I'm just preparing myself to do more of it. So let's see what
Yes.
challenges do we face in that part as well. Okay, so let's move on to the rapid fire questions that I ask everyone.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
okay, Milena, tell me what drives you, what keeps you focused on public spaces?
Um, the big drive is actually to see to see a place really being used. To see this transformation, to be part of the transformation from something that it's completely ugly and impossible and crazy into something that it's really been used. This transformation from ugly duck to the beautiful swan. It's something that I really like working with public space. That could sometimes even the very banal piece of infrastructure can become something nice, and sometimes really the completely dead end street can just become green and beautiful. So this transformation is really something that drives me a lot.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Share any proudest moment of your work life that makes you happy whenever you recall it.
When I was in college, is that the question? Sorry. The
And share any proudest moment of your work life that makes you happy whenever you recall it.
progress in work life. um, let me see. Well, maybe one of the good progresses in work life was actually when I started to work for myself, and when I started to really initiate projects myself, and to build a team of like-minded people who work with me. So that's definitely one of the biggest moments. And another thing is when I kind of ventured into creative industries, or let's say creative categories, which are not necessarily architecture, but has a lot to do with space, and to work with some kind of inspiring people who are not architects but who understand space very well. So right now I'm working a lot with web developers, and it's completely wonderful to work with those people, who understand communication, who understand user experience from a completely different view. And I like to combine those knowledges with my spatial knowledge, because I think we can learn a lot from different disciplines when about involving people in changing behavior or doing something or improving their space. So that's those two moments, I think, are the biggest, the most interesting work life changes, let's say.
Great. Very sweet. Okay, share any hardest moment of your work life that you find more struggling time, and you learned something from it as well.
Yeah, the hardest moments are, of course, it's again trying to be persuasive, or trying to really be the advocate for something, and not to be knocked down by criticism or by skepticism, saying like, oh, but that's really something that it's not so important, or that's something that it has nothing to do with the design, that's something that has nothing to do with the professional design. Why do you work with communities, or why do you involve people? Because they're not designers, they don't know. So it's a bit of that kind of breaking those kind of silos, like, but we can have really some good inputs and learning moments. We can make much better and useful designs when we really listen to those kind of users. uh, that's still quite difficult, but the climate is changing, at least in Europe, when it comes to that. There is a lot of attention now to really listen to the users of the space, to try to understand, to try to kind of soften the planning standards, or try to soften this rigid one solution fits all approach, and to work more with complex data, complex inputs, complex processes. And I think that's the positive view. I think it's going to be a bit more easier. Maybe the hardest part is behind us. But still, advocacy is quite difficult.
Yes, I agree. And while you were saying that, I realized that about the climate change, if we are not educating the people for the daily changes or the daily lifestyle that they are living with, if we are not bringing it to awareness among them, then the contribution to the CFCs is not going to reduce. We have to bring awareness to people and asking them to reduce it and to make their lifestyle better for the global interest, for the global benefit.
Yes. I think that's truly. I totally agree. That's really essential. You have to, if you really want to have this kind of positive change happening, you have to start with what is close to people, to their everyday activities. That's where you start with. You can't start with a narrative saying only you have to ride a bike because it's good for the planet.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it's a quite abstract concept, and sometimes it doesn't really fit with people's needs, which they're every day, if they have to go to work 50 kilometers away, it's not, and if there is no infrastructure, they cannot just switch to that to save the planet. They have to work and earn, and it's like, so first you need to understand these daily or let's say life dynamics before going into big changes. And that's I think that's important. I think placemaking has a big role in that because it deals with small scale, it deals with neighborhood scale.
Yeah, and the example you just shared about the bike and the infrastructure, that's exactly my content for the article that's coming very soon. Because we are not ready for the,
Yeah.
we don't have the infrastructure and the development over here. Like we have schools and the institutions at one side of city, and we live in the other side of city.
Yeah.
How can we travel through bike? So yeah,
Yes.
I agree. Okay, so
Yes.
do you have any placemaking mantra that you love, or any favorite quote of yours that inspires you to your activities, to your civic engagement?
No, I don't have those placemaking quotes. It's it's I rarely guide myself by quotes. It's, so I really can't give you any, But there are some let's say awesome placemaking tools, or let's say placemaking micro placemaking movements. Maybe you can use it as a quote as well. For instance, right now I'm quite deep into understanding and supporting the asphalt art, the kind of these horizontal murals as a way of placemaking. And there are so many of those smaller ideas and initiatives, and I think that's as a quote for as a quote for this year, let's say, I would say let's try to do a bit more of the asphalt art.
Great. That's exactly what I was asking. Like, just have something, some intention to follow, or some guideline to follow. Okay, so do you have any opinion about Pakistan, placemaking in Pakistan?
Well, I would like to learn more. I would like to see more, and I would like to know how can we support you more in showcasing this. I also already think it's the Make It Happen series is such a wonderful tool to have the conversations about placemaking from around the world. I'm quite. I would really like to visit and to see how the cities really look like. What are the local initiatives? Sometimes things happen even without knowing that they are placemaking initiatives. So I would like to see that. And I think there is such a big potential, considering how big the cities are, how big the country is, and how relatively young the population is. So I hope there is going to be a lot of in the development in those in that area, especially youth and placemaking.
Thank you so much for sharing your very, very wise, insightful lesson or the advice, because it means a lot to me. And thank you for appreciation as well. Okay, any message for the global leaders out there, the young professionals that are joining in?
Well, first, thanks for inviting me again. It's wonderful to give this interview and to be probed with all these questions. And maybe as a last message, or let's say advice or guidance or direction, is of course just please use placemaking as much as possible to get connected with the communities, to get connected with what's happening in your city. And use it really as a way of, I wouldn't say as a way of life, because it's maybe a little bit too too ambitious to say that, but just see it really from the positive side as a great way to connect people, to connect places, and to create something within the framework of everyday life. And just be brave and be ready to experiment and have a lot of fun. That would be the final advice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Milena, for your time, for your efforts, for being here. Thank you so much. I love talking to you and learning from you. Have a great day.
Yes. Thank you, Asbach, and I hope to talk to you again.
Very
See
soon.
you soon.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Pleasure.